Hi, friends. I'm Mike, and welcome to another Mike Chat. It's been a while since I've done a monologue. Part of the reason is that there were a lot of things evolving around the Ukraine situation where I was curious to see how they would turn out and whether I would turn out to be correct about my initial analysis or not. My current take is that not much has changed. As far as the US is concerned, we still see consistent evidence that they're either completely incompetent in their negotiations with Russia or, as I would say is almost more likely at this point, they've already agreed to sort of try to split up Europe between them. Um, as you probably know, Ukraine actually agreed to a complete ceasefire, and since then, no pressure whatsoever has been put on Russia to actually agree to the same terms. And instead, Russia gets sympathy for continually diluting the agreement, while Ukraine has been once again given a straw man sort of minerals deal on terms that the US knows it can't possibly agree to. And then I'm sure they're going to be threatened with some consequences for disagreeing, and then Europe's going to have to step in. The good news is that Europe is keeping up their part and keeping up the pace. We have the Czech initiative resurfacing with a commitment to deliver 1.3 million shells to Ukraine this year, which is a significant increase from before. And I like this initiative because it's been pretty good at abstracting where these shells are coming from. I think we see that Europe has been quietly ramping up its weapons industry, but doing it in a way that dilutes the information about exactly where and by whom everything is produced. And I think that's exactly how it should be. We're also seeing somewhat surprising deliveries of different European fighter plane models in Ukraine. And to me, this means that instead of still trying to get Russia to just leave willingly by sort of foreshadowing these escalations and the specter of increased Russian losses and F-16s going to Ukraine and stuff like that, at least now like Europe is in a mode where the goal is just to get Russia armed, where the goal is just to get Ukraine armed up and resupplied as quickly as possible without showing all of their cards. Forbes also published an article that I like a lot that Ukraine actually seems to be producing about as much high quality artillery as all of Russia, maybe even more. 40 high quality howitzers capable of hitting targets up to 40 kilometers away, some mobile, some towed, on like one howitzer that can be put on different platforms. I think it's very impressive. And I'm sure they're getting the materials and possibly other support from Europe as they should be. But once again, I got to point out, like, this is one of the biggest reasons that Ukraine can't lose this war now, right? We have a country that's capable of producing as much weaponry as the entire rest of Russia, and that still has an entire fighting population between 18 and 25 years of age. That is untapped. So if Russia were to take Ukraine, right, then Russia would basically take most of the current weapons manufacturing capability of Europe, double its own weapons manufacturing capability, and have another million of soldiers or so that they can mobilize, right? And it would become like another Chechnya, except much, much worse. So it is absolutely imperative that Russia gets out of Ukraine and that Europe defends Ukraine successfully and helps defend Ukraine successfully, or rather that Ukraine defends Europe successfully. And of course, I'm also happy that the German Green Party didn't disappoint me. I said last time that I expected them to be rational and ultimately support the German constitutional change that they needed to deliver a $1 trillion infrastructure and defense budget, and they didn't disappoint me. If only they weren't so strongly against nuclear power, I would have voted for them without reservations. I still voted for them, but with reservations. Now, this isn't a news show, but of course, I have a very active interest in following current events internationally. So I have to spend a bit of time on this Signal chat that has been blowing up. So I'm going to read it with you. You know why? Because at the start, it's really, really funny. But before I go into it and we enjoy some of the early bits, I want to be clear that my overall response to this event definitely hasn't been amusement. Because at the end, it's still ultimately about a loss of human life. And some boardroom types clapping each other on the shoulder and congratulating each other like they're actually lifting a finger for an accomplishment is a sad thing to see, even when human life isn't lost. And doing it when humans have been killed, while they're comfortable being chauffeured around in the back of a limousine, ignoring the driver and fat fingering on their cell phones, is just that much worse. So with that, here goes. All right, now this is from The Atlantic. This is the Houthi PC, and I'm guessing private chat, small group. Thanks a lot to The Atlantic for putting this out. I really appreciate it. I know they didn't want to, and I think they actually did everything to warn the administration, as long as the administration was somewhat honest, that they wouldn't do this, because they were more concerned about national security. But given that the event is in the past and how the White House was going about denying it, I think they did the right thing. And I really appreciate what they did. So it starts with Mike Waltz. Team, establishing a principals group for coordinating on Houthis, particularly for the next 72 hours. My deputy, Alex Wong, is pulling together a tiger team of deputies, agency, chief of staff level, following up from the meeting in the sit room this morning for action items, and we'll be sending that out later this evening. Please provide the best staff point of contact from your team first to coordinate with over the next couple of days and over the weekend. Thanks. And then an M. Mar Mike Needham for state. Okay, wait. Okay, so they're listing their staff point of contact for each of them. And so you have them adding Mike Needham for state, Andy Baker for VP, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then Mike Waltz again. Team, morning in your high side inboxes, state and DoD, we developed suggested notification lists for regional allies and partners. Joint staff is sending this AM a more specific sequence of events in the coming days, and we will work with DoD to ensure COS, like Chief of Staff, Office of the Vice President, and the President are all briefed. And then JD Vance. Now this, I think, is actually interesting because there's this very strange little possibility that he may be trying to do the right thing here and to somehow disguise it. If I'm going to give him a lot of benefit of the doubt here, and I mean a lot, like generally speaking, you need some kind of pretext and pretense if you try to keep Trump from doing something horrible and idiotic, right? And any pretext is probably worth it. But let's go through what he says here, right? So, team, I'm out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we're making a mistake. 3% of US trade, bullshit excuse, but 3% of US trade runs through a Suez, 40% of European trade does. There's a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message. But I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself. Good job, guys. but there's a strong argument for delaying. But there's a strong argument for delaying this a month and doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. Now, the last point is very good because your economy is fucking tanking. But aside from this being hilarious with respect to the league, I believe he may be trying to sort of prevent or defer this attack and just finding some argument that may work for this crowd. Keep in mind, I believe that Vance is kind of a psycho, but I thought he's intelligent. And the argument he's making here is completely bogus. So something doesn't fit, right? He doesn't think that Trump is doing this because he cares about trade in the Suez Canal. I don't think. I think that's a complete misstatement. The reason to do this is to send a message to the world, the whole world, showing that he's no longer afraid of using violence. That's my take. And what I'm seeing here maybe is JD Vance trying to throw in some argument that he hopes might sort of bubble up to the president and that might convince him not to do this. Maybe I'm giving him a very large benefit of the doubt, but I just don't see that this argument, which is incredibly pointless, is one that he himself would actually believe. Yeah, so let's go on then. So there's Joe Kent. There's nothing time sensitive about the timeline. We'll have the exact same options in a month. Not anymore. The Israelis will likely take strikes and therefore ask us for more support to replenish whatever they use against the Houthis, but that's a minor factor. I will send you the unclassed data we pulled in on BAM shipping. I guess that's about like how much shipping is actually going through there and being lost. And then John Radcliffe from the CIA perspective, we're mobilizing assets to support now, but a delay would not negatively impact us, and additional time would be used to identify starting points for coverage on Houthi leadership. Now, that's interesting to me. There are actual people here in charge of gathering intelligence for the operation, and they're actually saying, no, give us more time and we'll be able to hit more important people, right? They're actually saying, look, right now, we're hitting some goon. This isn't going to accomplish anything except sending some message. But if you want us to actually hit where it hurts, where it counts, then do give us more time. And then, of course, there's this Pete Hegseth. This is just Trump's tool. This guy has no background, no competency. He knows that his entire job, and the only reason he's there is because he's the ultimate suck up to Donald Trump, right? This is just mindless minion. Just this mindless minion. And so he says, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS. Important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out. Economy, Ukraine, peace, Gaza. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on one, Biden failed, and two, Iran funded. So this is amazing to me. First of all, how dumb he thinks everybody is, right? Nobody knows who the Houthis are. This is a group that literally shot rockets at Formula One races. Like, so much publicity has been around the Houthis, you can't really not know who they are unless you are never going to hear or read about any of this happening in the first place. There is no way that anybody who follows events doesn't know who they are. And you can always, I mean, in the US, with the racist Trump followers or whatever, you can probably just say you bombed some Arabs and it's all good. Like, it doesn't matter. And then this messaging is the only thing he cares about, right? This messaging is the only thing he cares about. He doesn't give a shit about the subject matter, doesn't give a shit who gets blown up, doesn't give a shit what this actually accomplishes. We're going to send a message that Biden failed and we're being tougher and Iran funded something. Let's go. All right, but anyway, let's get back to it. Waiting a few weeks or a month doesn't necessarily fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes action first or Gaza ceasefire falls apart. And we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both. We're prepared to execute. And if I had a final go or no-go vote, I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. You're bombing them. Anyway, I see it as two things. One, restoring freedom of navigation. How would you like to get a bomb dropped on you and be told, that's not about you? Anyway, a core national interest, and two, reestablishing deterrence, which Biden created. Yeah, like Trump is doing such an amazing job establishing deterrence against aggression right now, like especially from Russia, right? Like, yes, doing a fantastic job deterring Russian aggression and all the aggression that really matters against the West. Fantastic, amazing, God. We can easily pause, and if we do, I will do all we can to enforce 100% OPSEC. I welcome others. 100% operational security. This is too funny. This is funny to read this out loud, right? Given that this is all leaked, like they added some guy that didn't even know their chat, and they're talking about how it's completely secure. Wow. The trade figures we have are 15% of global and 30% of container. It's difficult to break that down to US specific because much of the container either going through the Red Sea or around Cape of Good Hope, sorry. Our components going to Europe, that turns into manufactured goods for transatlantic trade to the US. Whether we pull the plug or not today, European navies do not have the capability to defend themselves against the types of sophisticated anti-ship cruise missiles and drones the Houthis are now using. So whether it's now or several weeks from now, it will have to be the US that reopens these shipping lanes. Per the president's request, we're working with DoD and state to determine how to compile the costs associated and levy them on the Europeans. And I guess there you have the real reason for the tariffs. Now, again, this is weird. You have these figures in the room, and this is where it muddles the picture for me of, like, what the fuck is J.D. Vance's role? Waltz is saying this is like some kind of answer to J.D. Vance's economic perspective around Europe, right? But he's calling out there's such a thing as international trade, and that it is actually internationally beneficial, which is a very weird thing to even see that coming out of the Trump administration at all. So I'm not sure Trump knows or cares about any of these factors. Let's move on to Michael Waltz again. As we stated in the first private chat, we have a fundamental decision of allowing the sea lanes to remain closed or reopen them now or later. We're the only ones with the capability, unfortunately. From a messaging standpoint, we absolutely add this two of horribles on why the Europeans must invest in their defense. I have no idea what the fuck he's saying there. Let me go through this again. As we stated in the first private chat, blah, blah, blah. from a messaging standpoint, we absolutely add this two of horribles. Maybe he's using voice typing. I don't know. I don't know. I guess it's one of those autocomplete things. Like, but my guess is that he meant something like add this to the parade of horribles. Like that's a saying. I guess he must have said something like that, or meant it. Now, still, this is weird because yes, the Europeans are investing in their defense, right? But you know that half of the fucking reason the Europeans are now investing in their defense is because they might want to defend against the US. Um, like, you have no idea how much this could blow up in your faces, guys. Then JD Vance at Pete Hegseth. If you think we should do this, let's go. I just hate bailing out Europe again. The most famous line that I think I've seen quoted in all of the other news articles about this. And frankly, yes, this one hurts. Okay. And what this one made me wonder, yeah, is do any Americans know that Europeans also died for their security for 15 years? Like, I have to say, when I moved to Germany, I had never thought of European German soldiers dying in Afghanistan. Yeah. And the reason is because the entire time while the US was in Afghanistan and Iraq, in the US, the only soldiers you would hear mention of would be the American ones. The only soldiers you would hear of dying in the casualty numbers, like a couple thousand after 15 years, would be the Americans. But the Germans were there, right? The rest of NATO was there. They all put their soldiers in harm's way to support the US in Afghanistan, where we all know that even the war on terror in Afghanistan was a relatively flimsy pretense to actually walk into another country. But they agreed that the US, at least legally according to the NATO charter, had the right to involve NATO in self-defense after they got attacked. And so the US took Europe in along with it, right? And I know people that have hearing loss and other injuries in Germany, Germans, because they spent time there. And they also got blown up by IEDs and they also got in harm's way. So there's no way that this is something that was unique to the US, yeah, or that only Americans got hurt. 1,160 other NATO soldiers died there too. And you're going to say you're bailing out Europe, right? You got attacked in your own country, and all of Europe came to support your kind of idiotic response to this for 15 years. And this is what you're going to say. And it's ridiculous. And I have no idea where the fuck this comes from. Like, you can repay the loss of life that Europe also had to try to help defend the US in this idiotic pursuit in Afghanistan. And you're ignoring that Ukraine is sacrificing their lives right now to help defend Europe and the US, which ultimately protects US economic interests, right? Right now, Ukraine is protecting Europe's ability to import an extra $120 billion a year worth of American gas and resources into Europe every year because Europe pivoted to letting the US supply everything since 2022. The US is already getting more money back with this trade relative to what they're paying to support Ukraine per year. And Trump and Vance either don't know this or they just don't give a fuck, right? They're just gonna lie about this to their people. And this is fucking despicable to me, incredibly ignorant. And if there's any Americans listening to this right now, you gotta understand that Europeans also have paid with their lives to support American stupidity because they felt they had to because they were part of NATO. And actually, part of the reason that East Germans hate the West and started the AfD is because these were young people at the time that were previously part of the Soviet Union, which just spent a bunch of time shipping people to get killed in Afghanistan. And when they joined the fucking West, they don't have Western engineering degrees, so they join the military, and before they know it, they're getting shipped to fucking Afghanistan again, right? So they're like, what the fuck is the difference? Like, why are we supposed to think this is any better? All right, let's go. Having my coffee here. Let's just make sure our messaging is tight here. And if there are things we can do up front to minimize the risks of Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. That's the important thing. Right? Oh, Saudi oil facilities. Pete to VP, fuck the Europeans, yeah. I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. What about the Saudi oil facility? Anyway. But Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. Nobody else even close. Question is timing. I feel like now is a good time as any, given POTUS' directive to reopen shipping lanes. I think we should go. But POTUS still retains 24 hours of decision space. And then some SM. As I heard it, the president was clear. Green light, but we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. we also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. E.g., if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the US successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain exacted in return. And then Pete, of course, agrees. Now, this is beyond, right? Interestingly, to me, this shows that Trump may be kind of aware of this as a trade issue for him. So maybe I was wrong earlier when I said this is only about making a statement about violence. Like there's a sort of real transactionalism here. And like maybe they're even trying to signal to Europe on this grand scale, right? That they're like willing to recuperate costs from trade with Russia if they can't get it from Europe. But the only problem with all of this is that Europe already shifted $120 billion a year worth of economic opportunity to the US. Like I've now mentioned at least half a dozen times on this show, but I'm going to keep pointing this out. I'm going to keep saying it. Anyway, now let's go. We come to the actual, now here we come to the actual like logistical stuff, which frankly, personally, I find this stuff more boring because, okay, these are some operational details. Yes, this is classified. This is the reason you get in trouble for this, obviously. I love that. But yeah, you blew some shit up. Good job. And then let's see, VP, building collapsed, had multiple positive ID. Pete Carilla, the IC, amazing job. And then JD Vance, what? I guess he didn't get it. Typing too, yeah, I thought he was bright. Okay, typing too fast, the first target, their top missile guy, we had a positive ID of him and of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and now it's collapsed. Okay, this is where it gets dark, right, for me. Like, you know, you've got right there like 50-50 collateral, plus whoever you took out in the rest of that building. And you got one guy, right? And you know his girlfriend probably isn't part of the problem here, yeah? And you know that this guy, they say, is the top missile guy, like, but we don't know who the fuck this is. And I'm sure, and previously, like CIA guy said, you know, we can find better targets. And I'm sure there's going to be like, there's going to be some other top missile guy like in 5 minutes, right? Like if Hexeth got bombed, right, there would be a replacement in 5 minutes, and Hexeth doesn't contribute any thought or creativity or contribution or content into any kind of a decision-making process, right? So he's a complete non-entity. But you could say, hey, I got the top military guy, right? Yeah, and okay, so then you have this emoji crap. My God, this is painful. And yeah, powerful start. Yeah, CENTCOM is on point. Great job, all. More strikes online for ours tonight. Final report tomorrow. Particularly this stuff for me is hard to look at. And the stuff about Europe, like I said, I think that really needs to stop, right? At a 20% corporate tax rate, the additional trade with Europe already adds up to about 24 billion a year for the US. So overall, the US is net cash flow positive on supporting Europe against Ukraine. On supporting Europe and Ukraine against Russia already. I can't say this enough. And in terms of tax revenue, the actual taxpayer has something like a 5-year-ish return on investment, except for the fact that Trump is currently screwing that all up, right? Like, that's just it. Now Europe is scrambling like crazy right now to make deals and get off fossil fuels and natural gas and everything because of what Trump is doing. And all of that potential, all of that goodwill, all the financial benefits that came from that goodwill and already are coming from that goodwill, that's going down the drain because of these idiots. Okay, now one last thing I'll say about this Europe thing. It's strange that there's still this kind of wanting Europe to be stronger element, like even in there, right? Because like, at least this is part of the administration, I think, that still sees the US kind of playing this game of like really credibly threatening Europe just to get them to start defending themselves. But they still see them as an absolute ally, right? And they seem to trust that they will, you know, arm up and then come around and help the US. And the thing is, though, like, what doesn't fit into this picture at all, right, is to put this bizarre pressure on Ukraine and this manipulation on behalf of pro-Russian political parties throughout Europe. Yeah, I think that's inexcusable. It doesn't make any sense. I think that you can do all kinds of other stuff, right? Like you can threaten to walk out of NATO. You can say, okay, look, we're going to stop sending arms to Ukraine. You take over, right? Or, you know, we'll handle the West from the US's perspective and you'll handle the East, right? That's possible. But to put pressure on Ukraine and the way that they're dealing with that and the disrespect that they're showing Zelensky and the European political system, that's completely inexcusable. Like, and Zelensky, that guy's a hero, as far as I'm concerned, plain and simple. But one more thing, I'm going to leave you on a happy note. I got today in the mail my first ever NAFO badges. Check it out, check it out, check it out. Here we have a Sorry Out of Order War Translated badge. Very cool. And here we have the First Army in a Stable badge. Yeah, celebrating the brave donkeys being recruited by the Russians to fight Ukraine right now. And I gotta say, I really appreciate this as well. A handwritten note with a picture of the people writing them. And now this has obviously been written many times, and you can see that they put your name there at the end. But still, this is very cool. And they're taking the time to do this. I really appreciate this, and it definitely feels good to donate. So if you see one of these fundraisers, Jake Bro started one recently. It definitely feels good to support that, and you're doing something that's meaningful. These small donations, I think, matter. I think they send a lot of these, like they send a lot of the less glorious equipment. Not the big funding military packages, but the stuff is still necessary, and they're community driven. Like they try to get it exactly where they need it most. So yeah, that's it. I look forward to seeing you in your comments again. And after this, though, I'm going to be traveling for a bit, for a few weeks. So there's a chance that I won't be able to make another clip for about a month or so. I'm not going to the US this time. I'm going to be hitting some other countries, but I'll be back. And with that, I will talk to you next time. And as always, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.